Captain Daeho Kim walked slowly through the dim corridors of the Generation ship Indomitable Dawn. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as he made his way to the memorial wall. This was his daily ritual, one he had done for the past 30 years since becoming captain. The memorial wall stood 20 meters high, covered with millions of tiny lights. Each light represented a human life lost when Earth burned. In the center, holographic flames danced endlessly, never dying, never fading. The flames were orange and red, just like the real fires that had consumed their homeworld 10,000 years ago. Daeho touched the cold metal wall with his weathered hand. He was old now, 73 years by ship time. His black hair had turned gray and lines marked his face. But his eyes still burned with the same anger and sadness that every human aboard the ship carried in their hearts. "Good morning, ancestors," he whispered to the wall. "We are still here. We still remember." Behind him, footsteps approached. He turned to see Bo-Ra Lee, the ship's chief engineer. She was young, only 35, with quick hands and a brilliant mind. Her work uniform was stained with oil from the ship's engines. "Captain," she said, breathing hard, "I found something in the old archives. Something important." Daeho followed her through the ship's winding passages. The Indomitable Dawn was huge, stretching 15 kilometers from bow to stern. It housed 47,000 humans, the descendants of the original survivors who had escaped Earth's destruction. The ship was their world now, their only home, among the cold stars. They entered the archive chamber where countless data crystals stored the memories of their lost civilization. Ancient computers hummed quietly, keeping humanity's history alive. Bo-Ra led him to a terminal where numbers and symbols flowed across the screen. "I was doing routine maintenance on the navigation system," she explained. "I found these hidden coordinates buried deep in the core programming. They were encrypted with a code I had never seen before." She pressed a button, and the screen changed. New images appeared, showing star charts and mathematical formulas. At the bottom, a name appeared in ancient Korean script, Taemin Park. Daeho's eyes widened. Every human knew that name. Taemin Park had been Earth's greatest scientist, the man who designed the escape ships that saved them. Legend said he had died fighting the alien invaders to buy time for the evacuation. "These coordinates point to a location in the Kepler Nebula," Bo-Ra continued. "It's about 6 months' travel from here. But Captain, there's something else. I've been monitoring long-range communications. Other ships are heading to the same location." "Other ships?" "Human ships, Captain. Our people." Daeho felt his heart skip. For 10,000 years, the Indomitable Dawn had traveled alone through the dark void between galaxies. They knew other escape ships had left Earth, but contact had been lost long ago. The universe was vast, and space was empty. Finding another human ship was almost impossible. "How many?" he asked. "At least 17 different energy signatures, all moving toward the same coordinates." Daeho closed his eyes and took a deep breath. This was the moment they had all dreamed about but never dared hope for. After so many generations of loneliness, humanity might be reuniting. He called for Young-Sik Han, the ship's historian. Young-Sik was a tall, thin man who spent his days studying the records of Earth and teaching children about their lost home. When he arrived, his usual calm expression changed to excitement as Bo-Ra explained her discovery. "Taemin Park," Young-Sik said slowly. "The stories say he had a secret project, something he kept hidden even from the government. Many believed it was just a myth." "What kind of project?" Daeho asked. "A backup plan. Some say he built a hidden facility that could survive even the complete destruction of Earth. But no one ever found proof." Young-Sik accessed the ship's historical databases. Information flowed across multiple screens showing images of Earth before the burning. Green forests, blue oceans, white clouds, and great cities where humans lived in peace. It was beautiful, but it hurt to look at. "The Vorthax came without warning," Young-Sik said, his voice soft with old pain. "They were a reptilian species from the Andromeda galaxy. Their empire had conquered dozens of worlds always the same way. They would arrive, demand surrender, and if refused, they would burn everything. The screens showed new images now. Massive, alien ships, dark and threatening, filling Earth's sky. The Vorthax were tall creatures with scaled skin and yellow eyes. They believed that only the strongest species deserved to live. Humans, they decided, were too weak to survive. 50 million. Plasma bombs, Youngsik continued. They turned our world into a ball of fire. The oceans boiled away. The atmosphere burned. Every city, every forest, every mountain melted into lava. They thought they had killed us all. But we survived, Bora said firmly. Barely, Youngsik replied. 50,000 people on 18 ships, that was all that remained of the human race. We scattered across the universe, hoping at least some of us would live to see another day. Deho stared at the images of his ancestors' escape. The ships had been built quickly, with whatever materials they could find. They were not meant to be beautiful, only functional. They carried sleeping families' precious seeds and the accumulated knowledge of human civilization. The Vorthax probably forgot about us years ago, he said. To them, we were just another primitive species to eliminate. They made one mistake, Bora said, anger growing in her voice. They let some of us escape. Deho walked to the main communication console. With careful movements, he entered the coordinates Bora had discovered. The ship's navigation system calculated the journey. 6 months to reach the Kepler Nebula, assuming their engines held together. Set course for these coordinates, he ordered. Full speed. Captain, Youngsik said hesitantly. What if this is a trap? What if the Vorthax learned about the other ships? Deho looked again at the memorial wall visible through the archive chamber's windows. 10,000 years of exile. 10,000 years of carrying the memory of a burned world. 10,000 years of waiting for the chance to honor their dead. Then we face it together, he said, as humans should. The indomitable Dawn changed course, its massive engines pushing the ship toward an uncertain destiny. Throughout the vessel, word spread quickly. Other human ships were out there. The children of Earth were no longer alone. In her quarters, young pilot Sujin Park cleaned her fighter craft with extra care. Her grandmother had taught her the old stories, how humans once ruled the skies above a blue world. Maybe soon, those stories would become reality again. The ship sailed on through the endless night, carrying its precious cargo of human dreams toward whatever awaited them in the Kepler Nebula. The Kepler Nebula stretched before them like a sea of purple and gold clouds. Ancient stars died here slowly, their light painting space in colors that took Deho's breath away. But his attention focused on what waited among the floating rocks and gas clouds. 18 ships hung in space around a massive asteroid. Each vessel was different, showing how humanity had changed during their long exile. Some ships were sleek and fast, built for speed and stealth. Others were heavily armored, turned into floating fortresses. A few had been modified with strange technologies that Deho did not recognize. Incoming transmission from multiple sources, reported Communications Officer Yoonji Lim. Her young face showed excitement mixed with nervousness. This was the first time in her life she had spoken to humans from another ship. Put them all on screen, Deho ordered, the main display filled with faces. 18 captains from 18 different ships, representing the scattered children of Earth. Some looked similar to Deho's people, while others had changed over the generations. A few had pale skin from living in artificial environments. Others had developed stronger bones from living in high gravity, but they were all unmistakably human. I am Fleet Admiral Insu Cho of the military vessel Retribution, announced a stern-faced man with graying hair and sharp eyes. His ship was covered in weapons and armor plating. For 10,000 years we have prepared for war. Our time has come. Peace, Admiral, said a woman with kind eyes and silver hair. I am Dr. Hyune Song from the research ship New Horizon. We must be careful. We know nothing about the current state of the galaxy. Other captains introduced themselves. Captain Gildong Hong commanded a ship filled with warriors who had spent generations training for battle. Captain Mi Young-yoon led a diplomatic vessel that had spent centuries learning to negotiate with alien species. Each ship had developed its own culture and specialty. "The coordinates led us to this asteroid," Deho said, pointing to the massive rock floating nearby. "There must be something inside." Bora had been scanning the asteroid with their best sensors. "Captain, I'm detecting artificial structures beneath the surface. And something else. Energy readings that match Earth technology from before the burning." The 18 ships worked together to dock with the asteroid. Their crews, wearing protective suits, entered through ancient airlocks that recognized their human genetic signatures. Inside, they found corridors carved from solid rock, filled with machines that had waited 10,000 years for their return. In the center of the facility, they discovered a vast chamber containing the most advanced computer system any of them had ever seen. When Deho touched the activation panel, holographic displays came to life throughout the room. A figure appeared before them, a tall Korean man in a white lab coat. Though he was only a recording, his presence filled the chamber with authority and intelligence. "My name is Taemin Park," the hologram said. "If you are seeing this message, then humanity has survived the burning of Earth. I am sorry for what you have endured, but I am proud that you did not give up." The assembled captains watched in amazed silence as their greatest ancestor spoke to them across the centuries. "This facility contains everything we will need for our eventual return," Taemin continued. "Complete genetic records of every Earth species, cultural databases of all human civilizations, and most importantly, the weapons technology we will need to face the Vortex again." New displays activated showing technical diagrams that made even Bora gasp with wonder. Plasma cannons that could crack moons, shield generators that could protect entire fleets, faster-than-light drives that could cross galaxies in weeks instead of years. But technology alone will not save us, the recording warned. "The Vortex, rule through fear and strength. We must be smarter. We must be united. And we must remember that our goal is not just revenge, but justice for all the innocent species they have destroyed." The hologram of Taemin Park faded, but his words echoed in their minds. Around them, the ancient machines began transferring their data to the human ships. Millennia of preserved knowledge flowed into their computers like water into a desert. Dr. Hyun-A studied the cultural records with tears in her eyes. "Songs I thought were lost forever," she whispered. "Poems from Earth's greatest writers, the recipes for foods we only dreamed about." Admiral Insu examined the weapons data with growing excitement. "With this technology, we can build a fleet that no enemy can stop. The Vortex will pay for what they did to our world." But Captain Mi Young looked worried as she reviewed intelligence reports about the galaxy's current state. "The Vorthak Empire has grown massive," she announced to the group. "They control 3 entire galaxy arms now. They have enslaved dozens of species and built thousands of warships." Young Sik-Han had been quiet during the discussions, but now he spoke up. "According to these records, the Vorthaks have enslaved the Altarians, the Centauri, the Rigel Collective, and many others. All peaceful species destroyed or enslaved just like they tried to do to us." Captain Gildong Hong slammed his fist on a console. "Then we fight them all, every ship, every station, every world they have taken." "That would be suicide," Dr. Hyun-A said calmly. "We have 18 ships. They have thousands." Deho walked to the center of the chamber where Taemin's hologram had appeared. The weight of leadership pressed down on him as 18 different captains looked to him for guidance. Each represented thousands of human lives, the last remnants of their species. "Taemin was right," he said finally. "We cannot win through force alone, but we have something the Vortex do not expect. We have survived 10,000 years in exile. We have learned to adapt, to endure, to overcome impossible odds." He activated a new display showing a map of Vorthak space. Red dots marked their military bases while blue dots showed enslaved worlds. "We start small," Deho continued. "We hit their outer bases, learn their weaknesses, and free their slaves. Every species they have conquered becomes our ally. Every world they have enslaved becomes our friend." Bora smiled as she understood his plan. "We turn their empire against itself." Admiral Insu nodded slowly. A war of liberation, not just revenge. But it will take time, Captain Myung warned. Years, maybe decades. We have waited 10,000 years, said Gildong Hong. We can wait a little longer to do this right. The 18 captains spent 3 days in the asteroid facility, upgrading their ships with Taemin's technology and planning their campaign. They divided into smaller groups, each with specific missions. Some would gather intelligence, others would free enslaved worlds. A few would strike directly at Vorthak, military targets. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Huni made an announcement that surprised everyone. I have been studying the genetic records. With this data, we can restore Earth's ecosystem on any suitable world. We can have blue skies and green forests again. After we finish with the Vorthaks, Daeho said firmly, the 18 ships left the asteroid in different directions, carrying humanity's hope and anger across the galaxy. Their exile was ending. Their time of hiding was over. On the indomitable dawn, pilot Soo-Jin Park practiced with her upgraded fighter craft. The new weapons felt powerful in her hands, but she remembered her grandmother's words about honor and justice. This war would be different from the Vorthak's campaigns of destruction. They would fight not to conquer but to liberate, not to destroy but to build something better. The children of Earth were coming home at last. Vorthak Station Omega-7 floated in the darkness like a metal spider, its 8 arms stretching into space. The station guarded the outer edge of Vorthak territory, watching for threats that never came. For 800 years, nothing had challenged their empire. The reptilian guards were lazy and confident. They did not see the human ships approaching. Daeho watched the station through his ship's sensors. 3 other vessels flew with him. Gildong Hong's warrior ship Iron Fist, Mi Young Yoon's diplomatic cruiser Peaceful Dawn, and a new ship called Ghost Wind commanded by Captain Dong Hyun Kang. Dong Hyun's people were different from the others. They had spent 10,000 years hiding in asteroid fields and gas clouds, learning to survive where no life should exist. Their bodies had adapted to vacuum and radiation. They could work in space without protective suits for hours. Remember, Daeho said over the communication system, we want prisoners and information. Try not to destroy everything. Understood, Gildong replied, though his voice showed he wanted to unleash his weapons on the alien station. Dong Hyun's team moved. First, 12 figures in black suits drifted through space like shadows, approaching the station from its blind spots. The Vorthak sensors could not detect them. They moved too slowly, too quietly, like pieces of floating debris. Inside the station, Vorthak officer Sektar was drinking fermented blood wine and complaining about his assignment. 800 years without a single attack, he grumbled to his companion. Why do we even guard this empty space? His friend, a younger Vorthak, named Velthok, pointed at the tactical display. High Command says there are rumors of ghost ships in the outer regions, ships that appear and disappear without warning. Sektar laughed, showing his sharp teeth. Ghost ships, probably smugglers or pirates. Nothing our fleet cannot handle. At that moment, the station's lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red light. Alarms screamed throughout the corridors as Vorthak soldiers grabbed their weapons and ran to defensive positions. What happened? Sektar demanded. Unknown, sir, a technician replied, his scaled hands dancing over control panels. All external sensors are offline. Something has cut our power lines. Dong Hyun and his team had attached themselves to the station's hull like barnacles. Using tools that could cut through any material, they sliced through armor plating and entered the station's interior. They moved through the ventilation system, invisible and silent. The first Vorthak guards died without making a sound. The humans appeared behind them like nightmares, striking quickly and vanishing again. Soon, bodies littered the corridors, but the survivors could not find their attackers. Ghosts, whispered a terrified Vorthak soldier. The station is haunted by ghosts. Outside, Soo-Jin Park led a squadron of human fighters against the station's defensive ships. The Vorthak pilots had not fought a real battle in decades. They were slow and overconfident, expecting easy victory. Sujin's fighter moved like a dancing bird, spinning and diving between enemy fire. Her weapons struck with perfect accuracy, disabling Vorthak ships without destroying them. Behind her, other human pilots followed her example, their movements coordinated like a school of fish. Impossible, breathed a Vorthak pilot as his ship's engines died. How can they move like that? They fight like animals, another pilot reported. No formation, no pattern. How do we counter chaos? Inside the station, Dong Hyun had reached the command center. Sektar and his remaining soldiers barricaded themselves behind energy barriers, firing wildly at shadows. Show yourselves, cowards, Sektar roared. Face us with honor. Dong Hyun appeared directly behind him, moving through the air without breathing apparatus. His pale face showed no emotion as he placed a capture device on the Vorthak officer's neck. Sleep, Dong Hyun said quietly. The device released a neural toxin that dropped Sektar instantly. Around the command center, other humans emerged from impossible hiding places, capturing the remaining Vorthaks alive. Within 2 hours, Station Omega-7 belonged to humanity. Dae-ho boarded the captured station with Bo-Ra and Young Sik. They found the Vorthak prisoners secured in their own holding cells, guarded by Gildong's warriors. The reptilian aliens looked at their captors with confusion and fear. They do not understand what happened, Mi-young observed after interrogating several prisoners. To them, we appeared from nowhere like demons. Bo-Ra was examining the station's communication logs when she made a disturbing discovery. Captain, you need to hear this. She played a recorded conversation between Vorthak officers discussing their empire's expansion plans. The reptilian voices spoke casually about conquering new worlds and eliminating inferior species, but what shocked the humans was how they talked about Earth's destruction. The human purge, one Vorthak said with boredom. My grandfather served in that campaign. Ancient history now, barely worth remembering. What was special about that world? Asked another voice. Nothing. Standard cleansing operation. Primitive mammals with no real technology. The planet burned nicely, though. Pretty colors. They laughed as if discussing the weather. Young Sik's face turned pale with rage. They forgot us, he whispered. 10,000 years of exile, and they do not even remember our names. The recording continued with more casual discussions of genocide. The Vorthaks spoke of destroyed worlds like items on a shopping list. Entire civilizations reduced to footnotes in their military reports. Sujin Park had been listening quietly, but now she stepped forward. Her young face burned with an emotion Dae-ho had never seen before. Captain, I request permission to record. A message. What kind of message? One that will remind them who we are. Sujin stood before the station's main communication array. Her voice was steady as she spoke, but her eyes blazed with the fire of 10,000 years of human pain. To the Vorthak Empire, she began. You do not know us anymore, but we know. You. We are the children of the blue world you burned. We are the descendants of the mothers and fathers you murdered. We are the ghosts of Earth, and we have returned. She paused, letting her words sink in. You call it the human purge, as if we were insects to be eliminated. But you made one mistake. You did not kill us all, and now we are coming for you. The message was transmitted across all Vorthak frequencies before being cut off. Within hours, it had spread throughout their empire, causing panic and confusion. Dae-ho found Sujin in the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. That was a powerful message, he said. My grandmother told me stories about Earth, Sujin replied. Blue skies, green grass, birds that sang in the morning. The Vorthaks took that from us, they took everything. And now? Sujin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Now they will learn that humans do not forget. We do not forgive. And we do not give up. Across Vorthak space, military bases went on high alert. Emergency meetings were called. Ancient files were retrieved from forgotten archives. For the first time in centuries, the Vorthak Empire felt afraid. In his palace on the throne world, Emperor Zakthul the Destroyer studied reports of the ghost ships with growing concern. His advisors assured him that a few primitive survivors could not threaten their mighty empire. But Zakthul remembered the old stories his grandfather had told. Stories about a species that fought with desperate courage, that refused to surrender even when their world burned around them. "Find them," he ordered his generals. "Find these humans and destroy them all. This time leave no survivors." But the humans had already vanished into the void, leaving only empty space where their ships had been. Like ghosts, they had appeared from nowhere and disappeared again, taking their captured intelligence with them. The hunt had begun, but the hunters were no longer sure who was the prey. Emperor Zakthul the Destroyer stood 8 feet tall, his black scales gleaming under the throne room's harsh lights. His yellow eyes burned with rage as he read the latest reports from across his empire. 17 more military outposts had been attacked, 43 supply convoys had vanished. An entire slave world had been liberated. The humans were like a plague spreading through his territory. "How many ships do these ghosts have?" he demanded, his voice echoing off the marble walls. General Kexmore, his military commander, lowered, his reptilian head in shame. "We estimate no more than 20 vessels, Your Majesty. But they strike without warning and disappear before we can respond." 20 ships. Zakthul's claws scraped against his throne's armrests. 20 primitive ships are humiliating an empire of 10,000 worlds. "They fight like nothing we have seen before," another general reported. "No honor, no formation, no rules. They appear from asteroid fields, attack our weakest points, and vanish into gas clouds." Zakthul remembered his grandfather's stories about the human purge. The old emperor had spoken with respect about humanity's desperate courage, how they fought to the last breath even when their cities burned around them. "Gather my personal fleet," Zakthul ordered. "I will hunt these ghosts myself." 3 days later, the emperor's massive flagship Eternal Dominion led a fleet of 200 ships through the Vega system. Zakthul had received intelligence that human vessels were operating in this area, freeing slave worlds and gathering support from liberated species. "Scanner contacts," announced the ship's sensor operator. "Multiple vessels hiding in the asteroid belt." At last, Zakthul smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Today, the human purge is completed. But as his fleet moved to attack, something unexpected happened. The asteroids themselves came alive. Commander Seong-ho Jang had spent weeks preparing this trap. His engineering teams had hollowed out the largest asteroids and hidden human ships inside them. When the Vorthak fleet approached, the asteroids split open like metal flowers, revealing the waiting vessels. "Now!" Seong-ho commanded. The human ships erupted from their hiding places with devastating effect. Their new weapons, based on Taiman Park's ancient designs, cut through Vorthak shields like paper. But instead of destroying the enemy vessels, they targeted engines and weapon systems, leaving the ships helpless but intact. Zakthul watched in horror as his mighty fleet was systematically disabled. Human fighters swarmed around his ships like angry insects, too fast and agile for his gunners to hit. "Impossible," he breathed. "How did they know we were coming?" The answer came from Captain Mi Young-yoon, whose diplomatic ship had spent months building a network of spies throughout Vorthak space. Liberated slaves, sympathetic aliens, and even some Vorthak civilians who were tired of their empire's brutality had provided information about the Emperor's movements. Within an hour, Zakthul's flagship was the only vessel still capable of fighting. The Eternal Dominion tried to escape, but human ships surrounded it like a pack of wolves. Boarding pods attached to its hull, and human soldiers poured into the corridors. Gildong Hong led the assault on the ship's bridge. His warriors moved through the Vorthak defenders like a storm, their advanced armor protecting them from enemy fire. Behind them came Dong Hyun Kang's ghost soldiers, appearing and disappearing in the shadows. Zakthul fought personally, his massive claws slashing at the human invaders, but he was outnumbered and outmatched. When Seong-ho Jang entered the bridge, the Emperor was already in chains. "You cannot do this to me," Zakthul roared. "I am the ruler of galaxies. I am the destroyer of worlds." Seong-ho looked at the captured Emperor with cold eyes. You are a murderer who forgot his victims' names. The human fleet took the Emperor and his surviving crew to a secret location in neutral space. There, Captain Hanul Kim waited with a special communication array powerful enough to broadcast across the entire galaxy. Hanul had been chosen as humanity's voice because of her gift for languages and her deep understanding of alien cultures. She had spent years studying every species the Vorthax had conquered, learning their customs and their pain. "Begin transmission," Deho ordered. The broadcast reached every world, every ship, and every communication device in Vorthax space. Billions of beings watched as Hanul stood before the captured Emperor, her words carrying the weight of 10,000 years of exile. "People of the galaxy," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I am Hanul Kim, speaking for the human race. 10,000 years ago, this creature's ancestors burned our world and scattered our people to the void. They believed they had destroyed us completely. The camera showed Zakthul in chains, his mighty form reduced to a captured prisoner. They called it the human purge," Hanul continued. "To them, we were just another primitive species to eliminate. They laughed as our cities burned. They celebrated as our children died. They forgot our names before our ashes had cooled." Her voice grew stronger, filled with righteous anger. "But we survived. We endured. We remembered. And now we have returned. Not just to reclaim what was stolen from us, but to ensure that no other species suffers as we did." The transmission shifted to show images of liberated worlds, freed slaves, and the growing alliance of species that had joined humanity's cause. "We offer the Vorthak Empire one chance for redemption," Hanul announced. "Surrender unconditionally. Release all enslaved peoples. Transform your military into a force for peace instead of conquest. Do this, and we will show you the mercy you never showed others." Zakthul struggled against his bonds, trying to speak. "The alternative," Hanul said coldly, "is war. Not the quick genocide you prefer, but a long, grinding conflict that will end only when your empire is dust and your people remember what it means to fear." The transmission ended, but its effects rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. On thousands of worlds, enslaved species began to hope for the first time in generations. Ancient weapons were pulled from hiding places. Secret resistance groups emerged from the shadows. But Hanul's message had another purpose. Hidden within the broadcast were encrypted communication codes and weapon blueprints, transmitted directly to the oppressed peoples of the galaxy. Minho Bayek had designed the system to turn every receiving device into a potential rebel headquarters. On the former human colony of New Sol, now a Vorthak slave world, young Ko Min Seo received the transmission on a hidden radio. His grandparents had been human colonists who escaped Earth's destruction, only to be enslaved by the same enemies decades later. "The humans have returned," he whispered to his fellow slaves. "Our cousins from Earth are coming to save us." Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. The Vorthak Empire, built on fear and oppression, suddenly found itself facing rebellions everywhere. Admiral Insu Cho coordinated the uprising from his command ship, directing resources and support to rebel groups across the galaxy. "Strike, fast, strike hard," he ordered his captains. "But remember, we fight to liberate, not to conquer." Yoonji Lim worked with diplomatic teams to contact species that had never been conquered by the Vorthax, offering them alliance and technology in exchange for support against the common enemy. Within days, the mighty Vorthak Empire was in chaos. Their military, designed to crush weak opponents through overwhelming force, found itself fighting 100 different wars on 1,000 different fronts. Emperor Zakthul, still held prisoner by the humans, watched reports of his empire's collapse. With growing despair, "You have doomed the galaxy," he told his captors. "Without strong leadership, these species will destroy each other." Deho looked at the fallen emperor with pity. "You mistake fear for strength and oppression for leadership. Watch and learn what real unity looks like." The humans had done more than start a war. They had planted the seeds of a new galactic civilization, one built on cooperation instead of conquest, on justice instead of fear. But the fighting was far from over. The final battle still awaited them on the Vorthak throne world, where the last loyalist forces would make their stand. The children of Earth were coming home and they would not be denied. The Vorthak throne world of Sectaran hung in space like a black jewel, its surface covered with massive cities and military installations. For 3,000 years, it had been the center of the galaxy's most powerful empire. Now it was the last stronghold of a dying regime. Above the planet, the largest space battle in galactic history was about to begin, but it would not be the massive fleet engagement that Vorthak military planners expected. Admiral Insu Cho commanded the human fleet from his flagship Retribution. Around him floated not just the original 18 human ships, but hundreds of vessels from dozens of liberated species. Former slaves had become allies, united by their shared hatred of Vorthak oppression. "All ships, this is Admiral Cho," he announced over the communication system. "Today we end 10,000 years of exile. Today we finish what the Vorthak started when they burned our world." On the planet's surface, the last Vorthak loyalists prepared for a siege. General Hextar, the Emperor's cousin, commanded the ground forces from his fortress in the capital city. His soldiers were the finest warriors the Empire had produced, equipped with the most advanced weapons and shields. "Let them come," Hextar growled to his officers. "We will show these mammals what true strength looks like." But the humans had learned much during their long campaign. Captain Kyung-Suan led the ground assault, but his target was not the military installations. Instead, his team struck at the planet's communication networks, power grids, and transportation systems. The Vorthaks found themselves fighting a war where nothing worked as expected. Their communication systems broadcast human propaganda instead of military orders. Their weapons factories produced defective equipment. Their computer networks displayed images of Earth's burning and messages about justice for the dead. So Young Choi commanded the most unusual unit in the human forces. Her team's mission was to protect Vorthak civilians, ensuring that innocent lives were spared during the battle. It was a concept that confused many alien observers, who expected the humans to seek revenge through wholesale slaughter. "Why do you protect our children?" asked a captured Vorthak officer. "Because they are not responsible for their ancestors' crimes," So Young replied. "We fight to end the cycle of violence, not to continue it." The battle for Sectaran lasted 3 days, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Vorthak military, trained to fight conventional wars against inferior enemies, could not adapt to humanity's unconventional tactics. More importantly, they found themselves abandoned by many of their own people. Vorthak civilians, tired of centuries of endless war and brutal oppression, began openly supporting the human liberators. They provided intelligence, sabotaged military equipment, and helped evacuate their own children from combat zones. On the 3rd day, General Hextar's forces made their last stand in the Imperial Palace. The massive building, carved from a single mountain, had never fallen to any enemy. Its walls were 50 meters thick, its shields could withstand planetary bombardment, and its defenses had been perfected over millennia. Captain Dae-ho Kim led the final assault personally. At 73 years old, he was no longer young, but his determination burned as bright as ever. With him came the best soldiers from every human ship, volunteers who had insisted on finishing what their ancestors had started. The palace guards fought with desperate courage, knowing that defeat meant the end of their empire. Corridor by corridor, room by room, the humans advanced through the ancient stronghold. Their advanced weapons cut through Vorthak defenses, but they faced stiff resistance from soldiers who preferred death to surrender. Finally, Dae-ho reached the throne room, where Emperor Zak-Thul had once ruled his empire. The massive chamber was empty except for one figure standing beside the golden throne. Zak-Thul had escaped from human custody during the chaos of the final battle. Now he faced the leader of his enemies in the heart of his ancestral power. "You could have lived peacefully in the void," the former emperor said, his voice filled with bitter anger. "Why return for a dead world? Why not forget the past and build something new?" Dae-ho removed his helmet, showing his aged face and gray hair. "Because we are human," he replied simply. "We remember our dead. We honor our ancestors. We never abandon our family." Zak-Thul drew his ceremonial sword, a blade that had belonged to every Vorthak emperor for 5,000 years. Then you will die with your memories. The battle between them was brief but fierce. Zakthul was younger, stronger, and trained in combat from birth. But Daiho carried the weight of 10,000 years of human suffering, the dreams of every child born in exile, and the hopes of every ancestor who had died believing their people were extinct. When it ended, Zakthul lay dead on the floor of his throne room and the Vorthak Empire ceased to exist. But the real victory came not through violence but through what happened next. The humans did not claim the Vorthak worlds for themselves. Instead, they helped establish a galactic council, where every species had an equal voice. Former slave worlds became independent again, free to choose their own governments and futures. The Vorthak people, freed from their emperor's brutal rule, began the long process of learning to live in peace. Many of their younger generation, horrified by the crimes committed in their name, volunteered to help rebuild the worlds their empire had destroyed. Dr. Yune Song led the greatest project of all, the restoration of life to dead worlds. Using the genetic databases recovered from Taemin Park's facility, human scientists began growing new forests, filling empty oceans, and bringing extinct species back to life. The first world they restored was a small planet in the Sol system, not far from Earth's burned remains. They called it New Sol and built it as a memorial to their lost home. Blue skies stretched overhead, green grass grew in vast meadows, and birds sang in the morning just as Sujin Park's grandmother had described. Children of many species played together on New Sol's grassy fields. Human children taught alien friends the old songs of Earth, while learning new games from across the galaxy. They grew up knowing that peace was possible, that different species could live together without fear or hatred. Captain Dae Ho Kim lived to see the first harvest on New Sol, though he died peacefully in his sleep soon after. His funeral was attended by representatives from hundreds of worlds, all of them grateful for the human who had chosen mercy over revenge. Young Sik Han became the keeper of the new memorial wall on New Sol. Instead of flames, it displayed growing trees, each one representing a life lost during the dark years of war and oppression, but it also showed new growth, new hope, and new possibilities for the future. On quiet evenings, the old historian would tell children about Earth, about the blue world that had given birth to their species. He spoke of green forests and vast oceans of cities filled with laughter and dreams that reached toward the stars. But our real home, he would say, is not a place. It is the love we carry for each other, the memories we preserve, and the hope we pass to the next generation. Above them, New Sol's artificial moon shone down on fields where human children played with young Vorthaks, former enemies learning to be friends. The cycle of violence that had destroyed Earth would not be repeated here. The children of the blue world had finally come home. Bo-Ra Lee, now an old woman with white hair and gentle eyes, worked in the planet's central computer center. She maintained the great databases that preserve the history of every species, ensuring that future generations would remember both the tragedies and triumphs of the past. Sometimes, on clear nights, she would look up at the stars and think about the indomitable dawn, still sailing through space with its cargo of human dreams. Other ships had followed it into the void, carrying seeds of Earth civilization to distant galaxies. Humanity had learned that home was not a place to be conquered, but a feeling to be shared. They had returned not just to reclaim their world, but to ensure that every species in the galaxy could find their own home among the stars. And in the growing cities of New Sol, where former enemies worked together to build a better future, the dream of the blue world lived on.